Alright, kiddos, we are now going to talk about how to find slope from a formula. So far we have talked about how to find slope from a graph with rise over run. We did slope from tables using change in y over change in x. Now we're going to use this thing called the slope formula, which is a formula we can use if we don't have a graph or we don't have a table and we just have points and we need to find out the slope. So given 2 points, x1 and y1 and x2, y2, we want to find the slope m. And so here is what the slope formula looks like. Please do not let it mess with you. It is not a big deal. Slope is going to be, and if you will remember, it's the change in y over the change in x. And so we're going to be finding the change in the y values and the change in the x values. And if we are talking about what that means mathematically, the change of something is to subtract it. So the slope formula is going to be y2 minus y1. So I'm subtracting my two y values over x2 minus x1, so I'm subtracting my two x values. We do it backwards because that's just how it works. Okay, it's always the second one minus the first one, but it's still the change in y over change in x. So this part right here is what you need to know to find the slope given 2 points. So let's practice a couple. So we're going to determine the slope of the line that passes through each set of points, and we have 3 examples here. We're going to start with example 1. We want to find the slope of the line that goes through these 2 points. So the slope, which is represented by the letter m, I'm sure that's because the Greek version of it started with an M. It also could have something to do with the fact that mountains have slopes and we're finding slope. That's how I remember it. Okay, but M always represents slope. So we're going to have to use our formula, the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're just going to subtract our 2 points. So here I have x and y. These are our first ones. And then I have x and y, and these are the second ones. So I'm going to do the second minus the first. So I'm going to do my 7, because it's y2, minus 3, which is y1, over 9 minus 2. And then I'm just going to subtract to find out what that equals. Well, 7 minus 3 is 4. 9 minus 2 is 7. And so the slope of that line that goes through those 2 points is 4/7, which means if I were to graph it on a graph, I would have to go up 4 and over 7 to get from this point to this point. If I had them in a table, this would be the change in the y values over the change in the x values. So let's do the next one. We're going to find the slope between these two. So we're going to do subtract the two y values. So I'm going to do -1 minus 4 over, now please be very careful here because you have a -5 and another -5 and you're subtracting. So this is going to be -5 minus -5. This minus sign from the original equation does not take the place of this negative. You have to write them both. Now you know how I feel about double signs, so I would take this and I would change it to -1 minus 4 over -5, and because negative and a negative makes a plus 5. You don't have to. You can use your calculator, type it in like I wrote it, but please write both of them down, the minus and the negative, because if you don't, you're going to get the problem wrong. Well, -1 minus 4 is -5, and -5 plus 5, or -5 minus -5, happens to be 0. And hopefully you have gotten by now that division by 0 is not okay, so the slope of this line is going to be undefined. And hopefully you remember by now that that means this is a vertical line, because vertical lines have undefined slope and their equations are x equals. Vux comes into play. Okay? So let's do the last example. This time it gives us 3 points. It says we got to find the slope that goes through those 3 points. Now here's the cool thing. I only need 2 points to find the slope. I can pick 2 of the points and ignore the third one altogether. Because I want practice with negatives, I'm going to ignore this point, and I'm going to use these 2. So I'm going to find the slope between those 2 points. So I'm going to do -7 minus -2. And then I'm going to do -14 minus -6. And if you remember, these negatives make a plus, so it makes it really easy. So -7 plus 2 becomes -5. -14 plus 6 is -8. These 2 negatives cancel each other out, so the slope of the line that goes through those 3 points is 5/8. So if I were to have it on a graph to get from this point to this point to this point, I'd have to go up 5 and over 8. That's how we find slope using the formula. So the next problem, it gives you a graph And it says the graph shows how much water is in a reservoir at different times. Find the slope and explain what it represents. You can use the formula here. You can absolutely use the formula, but I have a graph. I have a picture. I can read what the points are. I am simply going to do rise over run. My numbers, however, are gross, but it's okay. I can still do rise over run. I can see here that my y values went from 3,000 to 2,000. Well, that is a change of negative 1,000 because they got smaller. And my x values went from 20 to 60, which is a change of 40. This 20 to 60 is a change of 40, and it got bigger. So my slope is going to be negative 1,000 over 40. And I'm going to simplify that, and I can just cross off a 0 on each one. So I have negative 100 over 4, which the last time I checked was the same thing as negative 25 over 1. Now, what does it mean? What I have is the water in thousands of feet cubed. Feet cubed means volume. Okay? You have a unit cubed that is going to mean volume. So we have the volume of the water each hour. Okay? So we have the volume in the reservoir each hour. And since my slope is negative, that tells me that the volume of the water is decreasing. So what this means is the volume of the water in, whoops, there's an R there, the reservoir is decreasing because my slope is negative 25 cubic feet per hour. So that's what that means, and I got that from looking at the units on my graph. So let's practice just a couple more. Here's where we really are going to apply our slope formula, because now what I have is I have 2 points, but if you'll notice in one of the points I am given an R as opposed to what the actual coordinate is, and then they tell me the slope. So what I have to do is figure out this missing piece, and I'm going to do that using my slope formula. The m equals the change in y over change in x. Well, I know what my m is. It's negative 1/3. That's going to equal my y values, my change in y over my change in x. So it's going to be 3 minus r over 6 minus 9. Well, we're going to simplify this. So I have negative 1/3 is equal to 3 minus r. 6 minus 9 is negative 3. And if I want to solve this, don't go trying to clear your fractions. You can here, but I'm just going to treat this like a proportion, and I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm going to cross multiply. Negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3 equals. Then I'm going to cross multiply this way. So 3 times 3 is 9, and then 3 times r is 3r, so it becomes minus 3r. So now I have this equation, 3 equals 9 minus 3r, and I got that from cross multiplying this proportion. I'm going to solve this for r, so I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. So I have negative 6 equals negative 3r, and then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3, and I'm going to get that 2 equals r. So the value that goes here is a 2. And if I take these and plug them in and find the slope between these 2 points, it should be negative 1/3. So let's practice that again. So we're going to do this again. My slope is negative 3/4, and that's going to be equal to my y subtracted, so I have r minus 4 over 8 minus 3. Well, we'll simplify. 8 minus 3 is 5, so I have negative 3/4 equals r minus 4 over 5. And we're going to cross multiply again. So negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. And then when I do this, 4 times r is 4r, and 4 times 4 is 16, so minus 16. So I'm going to solve this for r. I'm going to add 16 to both sides, which gives me a 1 equals 4r. And when I divide both sides by 4, I get 1 over 4 equals r. So in this case, r equals 1/4. If you went ahead and divided it and you got 0.25, it's the same thing. Both of these answers are correct, but either way, this r is 1/4. It's the only way to make this slope work out. This last question is on here because I think that I have harped on this enough over the last 3 videos. So the slope of a line passing through negative 5, 7 and x negative 6 is undefined. We want to find the value of x. Well, if it is undefined, What do you know about its slope? The first thing you should know is that undefined means that its slope is going to be some number y over 0. Because it's going to be the change in y over 0, because the only way for it to be undefined is to divide by 0. That doesn't even have to be the important part. If you will remember, vertical lines have undefined slope. Their equations are x equals. Undefined slope means vertical line. It also means x has to equal the same thing no matter what. Well, right here, x equals -5. So right here, x has to equal -5. So x equals -5. That's the only way that line has undefined slope, is for those two x values to be the same. Vertical lines, undefined slope, x always equals the same thing. That is the slope formula. You will practice this when you come to class on Monday. Have a great weekend, and I will see you then.